In the mid-1800s, a family began experiencing strange occurrences in their home. Furniture would be overturned, objects would disappear and reappear at random, and they'd constantly hear scratching and banging on the walls. While they heavily suspected the paranormal, they'd soon learn it wasn't the house that was haunted, but rather their youngest sister. Today, we're taking a look inside the Great Amherst Mystery. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the unknown. I'm your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me hearing about this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
If someone that I know in the house, especially a family member, is possessed, I'm tying you down.
Okay.
I'm throwing holy water on you.
Splish splash.
I'm calling a priest.
Yep.
And then we're gonna figure out what goes on from there. I'm not gonna sit here and then just chill at the dinner table like everything is all kosher, and then randomly you just have a possession happening. Plates are flying everywhere, lights are flickering, you're vomiting all over me.
Right.
Let's just get ahead of that. You know what I mean?
Get ahead of it. Get a house that's got a cellar, chain that cellar door down, but just enough so it can pop open in case you want to ghoul out, you know. Just the eyes show.
Just the ugh.
Yeah, I don't know. What would you? So that's what you would do, and it kind of you left me on a cliffhanger because I don't know what happens after ...
I mean, it's up to. I'm hoping the priest takes care of it at that point.
Okay, fair enough. That is a professional ... right there. But if one of my siblings, the youngest one, started having paranormal activity around them, I don't know how I'd feel. And thankfully, there's enough of an age gap I could move out, and it might not be my problem.
Move out is. You know, I just finally feel like it's time for me to spread my wings, go out on my own, and live my life.
Time to go. Trevor, you're 9. What are you doing? I'm a man now.
Yeah, like your little sibling's room, and they're just talking to someone in a corner. You go, it's time to move. I'm not going to risk it.
Yeah. Dude, I don't know. There's something I think very particularly freaky about paranormal activity surrounding a person, and I think there's something extraordinary about this case in particular. It's going to get quite real. There are themes in this one, as always. Check out the description if you want a list of sensitive topics, but this is one of the, dare I say, best reported, or one of the best reported cases from this time period. We're talking about the late Victorian era, which was wrought with ghost stories all over the place. We've covered many of them before. However, what makes this one so interesting is that we're going to talk about this author and this book that comes out that explains everything that happened. And I think it allows us to have a lot more insight into a case like this. What makes a ghost story tick? What makes it permeate through the generations to modern times? Even when you think you can debunk it, what makes it grasp on to our interest, to really make a lot of people think that, no, it must be something more paranormal?
I mean, especially like back then, I feel like there was a lot more superstition, you know what I mean? And science was still finding its way, etc. And so there wasn't a lot of explanation. So there wasn't a lot of explanation when it came to even just medical things that are happening to people. So yeah, I could see it being rampant with like supernatural predictions and like, oh my goodness, they're possessed and vomiting like crazy. It's like, no, that's just a severe bowel movement or something like that they're dealing with, or, you know what I mean? And then it's like the possession.
Yeah, I had a bunch of cheese.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting case through that lens. And you're totally right. The Victorian era was very interested in ghost and the afterlife. Spiritualism was at like kind of an all-time high. It was really growing. And as I kind of have learned over this 5.5 years, almost 6 years of doing this podcast, I feel like I've seen the Matrix. Over the last 150 years, you can see the generations of what society is very interested in. Early on in this time period, the late 1800s, we're talking about ghost stories and poltergeists, things flying around or banging on walls. And, we talked about cases as silly as the talking mongoose, and we've talked about other cases as sinister or as saddening or upsetting as the Enfield poltergeist over in England. And that's not the 1800s, but it is a similar type of case. But all that is to say is it's a very interesting one because I think it allows us to open up the ghost stories that we're all familiar with and look a little deeper and tinker around and see, is there something more earthly here, or is there something a little bit more paranormal going on? We'll talk about both of those in the theories, but first I want to talk about Esther Cox. This is the woman at the center of this story, and her family, her moving around, the people she's interacted with, all of these build on her experience and these poltergeist-like activities. Before we dive in, lots going on at Red Web. I just want to say this real quick. On Wednesday, we do have another episode of Break Room live. If you want to join us and be part of that conversation live in the moment, that's happening this Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then Friday, we have yet another gameplay in our gameplay series called Fieldwork, where Christian pulls out a game and has us run the game. It's kind of like a simulation of sorts. This Friday, we're playing Obey the Voice. It's kind of like a haunted house style game. And Fredo, we're going to find out if you're going to listen to that voice or not.
Yeah, I'd rather not. We already, you already listened to some voices during our ghost hunt, and I'm just kind of just don't want to attempt it. You know what I mean? And now that I look back, time is passing, so I'm forgetting how surreal that ghost hunt was. And then we'll get back into October, and then I'll have a false sense of confidence yet again. And so I think I need to constantly remind myself that I feel like I messed around and found out a little bit.
You did find out a little bit, yeah. And that's why you kind of space them out. Just enough time to forget and then throw you right back in. I mean, we have some stretch goals still to do, Red Web on the road and another ghost hunt. So we'll see if it comes back in the dark. Well, speaking of a ghost story, let's dive into this case. So the story of the Great Amherst Mystery centers around a woman, like I said, named Esther Cox. Just so you have a photo to go with the name, we have an image right out of the gate. This is a very old image of Esther Cox.
That is a very old image. We see images that are black and white and everything. This one's like real grainy. Just
a standard woman, probably brunette here. It is, like you said, hard to say, with black and white, high contrast, long braided hair. And for anybody not watching the video version of the podcast, I should just go ahead and say this. We do also post these images on our Instagram if you follow us at RedWebPod. Otherwise, you can check out the video version on YouTube, Patreon, and Spotify. Okay, so now that you see what she looks like, Esther Cox was born on March 28th, 1860, in Upper Stewiacke, which is in Nova Scotia, Canada. So we're talking, from our perspective, Fredo, you and I, way northeast. So northeast off of Maine. So quite far north and east, and chilly. It's beautiful out there, but it gets chilly. So Cox was the youngest of 6 children and came from a family of farmers. At the age of 18, Esther was living with her eldest sister, Olive, as well as Olive's husband, Daniel Teed, and their 2 sons, Willie and George. Now, again, it's an old enough story, and, when a story permeates vocally for a while or verbally, it can be reported in different ways. So some reports state that the other sister, Jenny, their brother John, as well as Daniel's brother, also confusingly named John, all also lived in this house with them. So we either have 3 adults and 2 kids, or it's possible that the house had 6 adults and 2 kids.
Dang, that's a lot.
Yeah. Either way, it went from 5 people to 8 people, and the house isn't all that big. It has enough space. It's a 2-story house. I'll show you an image of it right here, but the house that you're looking at is referred to as Teed's Cottage. It was small, it was quaint. It was again located also in Amherst, Nova Scotia. Now the first story had 4 rooms, very standard. You had a parlor, a dining room, a kitchen with a pantry, and a very small sewing room.
Wow, 4 rooms on the first floor?
Yes. Now I imagine it would be a little squishy. This image makes it look quite small.
It does look very small.
So to give you an idea further, you can see those 2 windows up front and the slanted roof. Well, if you go upstairs, there is a very small landing. I think it's referred to as a kind of an entryway. And right there are 4 doors, 2 that go back and 2 that go forward. In each of those doors is a bedroom. So there's 4 bedrooms upstairs.
Got it.
And so you can kind of see the width of those bedrooms because those 2 windows go to the front 2 bedrooms, respectively.
Wow. So not big in terms of rooms.
Not huge, no. It's very, very humble, very cozy.
Yeah, a lot of rooms, but very tiny rooms.
So now you picture 5 or 8 people living in it, and you can see it being pretty squishy. I think this is important because it's kind of laying the foundation of the interpersonal connections, how people are feeling about each other. This is all important for the psychology of the house, right?
I mean, there's just a lot of people cramped together. So if anything happens, you're going to know.
Absolutely. And so now, sometime in the future, it's August 28th, 1878. Esther's living with her family, etc. Now, it seems that she was involved with a situation with a man named Bob McNeil. Now, again, the spelling of his last name is all over the place. You have MacNeil, you have McNeil with two different spellings. Either way, some sources describe this man as a young local man, positioning him more as a friend, while others position him more as a boyfriend type of figure.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So she's 18 years old. She's a young woman. She might be seeing a friend or a boyfriend. Either way, McNeil was reportedly a family member of Daniel's and had frequently been seen with Esther. Again, reminder, Daniel is essentially her brother-in-law. Now, the pair went out driving in the afternoon when suddenly he pulled the buggy over in a remote area. So this is a two-wheeled carriage drawn by horses. And she's kind of uncertain as to why they're driving around a little bit aimlessly. They don't really seem to have a specific location in mind, but then they pull over and he pulls out a revolver and points it at her and demands that she get out of the buggy. She's terrified as to what might happen if she kind of does this. Is she going to be left alone in the remote areas? Honestly, if she refuses, I'm also thinking what could go south here. But either way, she refuses to get out and he gets irate. And thankfully, before this situation can devolve any further, the two of them hear what sounds like another buggy coming down the road. And so he kind of stashes the gun away and gets the horses going, and off they go as if nothing ever happened. He then takes Esther home. When she arrives at home, she was seen sobbing. She seemed quite distraught. I mean, I think anybody would be. This confidant, this person that she knew, trusted even, pulled a gun on her for no known reason, right? Now, some reports state that she told her family immediately what happened, but other reports state that it took her a few weeks to let her family know as to the situation with Mr. McNeil here.
Yeah, it's traumatizing stuff. Someone you know and trust, and then also you want an explanation, but you also want to get away from them as quickly as possible.
You're totally right. And especially if you don't want to talk about it, or maybe you do want to talk about it, we don't know kind of how she felt. It's also unclear if she reported this to police. But either way, this would leave anybody rattled. Anybody's trust web would be very quickly tightened back down to the family. And this guy was kind of extended family too, so it almost starts to become like, who can you trust, right? And so again, we're painting a very vivid picture here of the psychology going on around Esther Cox and this family. Now, McNeil reportedly left Amherst shortly after this incident and reportedly never bothered Esther again, which is nice. Now, it was only after this situation was made prevalent that some sources state that McNeil kind of had a reputation around him, seemingly being cruel, and on multiple occasions, I don't know where this came from. I don't know who's reporting this or how it missed her and how she wasn't aware if the kind of community was.
Right.
But apparently this guy was known to, dare I say, skin cats alive for his own amusement.
Okay.
That's the kind of caliber of guy we might be dealing with.
How did no one be like, hey, this is the rumor going around with this person?
Right.
The house has a lot of people in it, so I don't know how no one knew. You think word get around, someone would know, and someone would, I don't know.
It's unclear if he had any sort of criminal history, but either way, this sounds like pretty sinister stuff, especially if this is word around town. I'm thinking, is this a case of I can fix him? He's not that way to me, but that way you let your guard down. I don't know. We could only speculate at that point.
Talk about pushing it as far as you can in terms of I can fix him.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be a lot to gloss over. 100%. Either way, right? Whatever his actual history was, this situation unfolded and she reacted the way she did. She said, no, I'm not doing this. He gets angry. He takes her home. Eventually, the family does find out, and he has split town at this point. Now, of course, this attack put Esther under great distress, which started to manifest in her body, as you can imagine. Like you said, it's very traumatic, and trauma can come out in many different ways, psychologically, physically, all sorts of things.
And we've talked about, again, that creates the perfect atmosphere for the paranormal, something sadistic to kind of possess and take over.
Right. It does seem unfortunate, and I am playing my hand a little bit here with my disposition. We're going to talk about both the believing and skeptic theories at the end. There's so much more that goes into this story, I want to say. But I do think that when we talk about enough of these cases, you do see, unfortunately, whether it's a broken household or a loss of a loved one or play pranking, there's something at the center of a lot of these cases when you really, really look. When you look at the psychology behind a ghost story, it often seems to revolve around something upsetting or even traumatic. Sometimes it's just playful, sometimes it is a little bit more positive, sometimes it is interestingly just like there, and there isn't any deeper, darker story, but there is a little bit of a trend I've noticed. So this is all manifesting in her body, and she reportedly began to suffer from seizures that caused her body to swell up, accompanied by fevers and chills. And I also don't want to falsely attribute this illness to what she experienced because I'm not a doctor or a psychologist. It's very possible it was in response to. It also could be just unfortunate timing of something that she did fall ill to. I just want to put that out there. It's an interesting timing sort of situation. Now, within a month of the incident, strange things also began to happen around the Teeds cottage. So not only is she feeling ill, fever, chills, seizures, now suddenly in the house, the full family is reporting hearing banging, knocking, rustling throughout the night. They would see objects lift off and throw across the room untouched. This isn't around any person in particular at this point. It just seems that things would fly off shelves, break across the room. Upon entering the room, people would find furniture, like heavy furniture sometimes, or chairs, completely upturned, and it didn't really seem to have any rhyme or reason to it.
Yeah, absolutely not. I'm out of the house.
Yeah, you're soaking the house in holy water. I know that.
I'm dousing it, everything. But I mean, we talked about this many times. You could leave the house, it still follows you. But I don't know, because if you really truly put yourself in that situation to like leave the place or to take huge actions, things like that, when you see some things moving around, do you truly believe it? You know what I mean? I mean, again, we did the ghost hunt. We heard some stuff. We got out right away. But I mean, should we have gone out sooner? You know what I mean? Like,
sure, yeah.
We did kind of sit there in the basement and talk about things instead of just running straight out and talking about things. And so you think if you put yourself in that situation, I don't know, because especially if you're a skeptic, you're not going to want to believe it. And you're not going to think it's real. You're going to need more evidence, more proof, something tangible, even though things are moving around. But you kind of just try and make excuses for it until there's something that's just you can't describe.
Sure. You want irrefutable evidence. And we're also sitting in a situation where, their youngest sister, Esther, her condition is still quite poor. And so how do you reconcile this moment where things that you can't properly explain or maybe are terrifying you are happening, while also something corporeal within your own youngest family member is also happening and also terrifying? Maybe there's also an opportunity here, from the believer's perspective, for such a heightened energy, such a heightened moment of pain and anguish. Maybe that just attracted whatever causes these type of paranormal activities, right? I have my disposition, but from a broad standpoint, that also could be what's happening here. It does seem that hauntings seem to echo trauma or death or the sinister more than they do more positive emotions, as it were. But I'm with you. I don't know what I would do in this moment. I know I would be absolutely mortified for Esther's condition and what she went through. And that's kind of what the family was feeling at this point. Her condition's still pretty south, so they decide, hey, let's call a family doctor to come visit. Let's get a house call going and see what they have to say. And of course, the doctor's main focus was Esther, but during the exam, while he's taking a look at her and everything, other things began to happen. We have an outside perspective now reporting on what's going on. Pajamas would move in the room that she was sitting in, and I couldn't get a description of how they moved. Like, was it that he left, came back, and they were unfolded?
Right.
Was it that he would see them kind of move up or shift?
Shoot across the room or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Was it subtle? Was it a lot? That would, I think, tell me a lot. But he also noted that he too could hear these scratching noises from within the walls, and if he's there to kind of look over Esther, I would imagine if she was scratching the bedpost to kind of give the illusion of that being somewhere else, that he might notice. But either way, that we're kind of juggling two terrifying situations here right now. Now, one of the more interesting, infamous portions of this story is unique. I've never seen this in another ghost story before. And apparently, the words, quote, "Esther Cox, you are mine to kill," end quote, reportedly appeared above her head at a certain point. Just like words appeared above her head, it's unclear how exactly they appeared, if it was carved or painted or handwritten, if anyone actively saw this happen, or if the room was vacant. These are details I would love to know, but this has widely been reported from this case.
Well, that's what I was saying. Is it writing on the wall? You know, but
Yeah.
it's just like words appeared from above your head, like a cartoon.
Right. Is it like a thought bubble, or is it that above you on the wall?
I mean, the way they're making it sound like that is that it's a thought bubble.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, you say writing on the wall, you know?
Literally. Yeah.
That's new. That I've never heard that one before.
It's very interesting. And part of me wants to be a little cynical and go, well, was the game of telephone a little bit manipulated over 135 years ago, this case was? Did somebody maybe sprinkle this in to add a little nighttime story zest? Mm-hmm. Or, did she write this on the wall and then sit down and then somebody came in and it looked like it appeared? Or did it actually appear, whether in the air or on the wall or what have you, while someone's there watching it form? Those are the details I'd love to have, but
I know.
Just don't exist, unfortunately.
It just makes it seem like it's like a cartoonish thought bubble come up.
Yeah.
But just I've never heard that before.
Really? Yeah. So regarding the doctor, let's kind of close that loop. So the doctor prescribed Esther sedatives to help her sleep, calm down, and maybe just whatever her condition was, maybe kind of slow things down. However, and this is for the skeptic in me, what kind of is antithetical to that, what happens is I would think that the action would die down in the house, right? Well, despite being prescribed these sedatives, the situation in the home only worsened. More continuous strange occurrences happened throughout the home, more frequently, maybe even more heightened. One night, Jenny actually described seeing her sister in a terrifying state. Here's what she had to say. Quote, her short hair
almost standing on end, face blood red, and her eyes looking as if they would start from their sockets. Her hands were grasping the back of a chair so tightly that her fingernails sank into the soft wood.
This is very out there descriptive hauntings going on here.
Yeah, it's very descriptive, very, dare I say, theatrical, but
it does sound theatrical. I will say that. It does seem over the top.
Compared to other cases we've seen, at least. Now, I know this is quite well documented. There is a book I'm going to talk about, but maybe that's why. Or maybe it's vivid because, again, a sister is terrified of seeing her youngest sibling in such a state, regardless of what it is. She's definitely going through something. So at this point, the family themselves deemed the house to be haunted, and their residence became kind of a spectacle across town. Many members of their community heard tell of these hauntings of Teed's cottage, and they wanted to see for themselves proof of the paranormal. Again, spiritualism's on the rise. They want to see if they can glimpse the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And visitors to their cottage, including clergymen, reported hearing loud banging, knocking noises. They also saw objects moving. Now, the thing that would really help me out with this is if these people came to visit while the house was empty, or if all known parties that were still there were seen, right? Like, oh, right. I'm here to see Mr. Teed. Let me see this house. Well, I'm the only one here, but yes, come into the foyer, banging on the walls, right?
It turned into a spectacle at that point. People visiting and not everyone's going to take it seriously, and some people will, and then there's some people going to be playing jokes or making fun of the situation, and it's just chaos. It's a circus.
Now, I don't know how much of it was the kind of people like looky-loos coming around and just see what was going on, or how much they leaned into it. There doesn't seem to be any sort of monetary exchange happening. We have seen that in the past where people are like, come on down and get a look at this.
Yeah, or they want to do a book deal sometime, shortly after, or things like that, and go, it's hard to believe. Look, get the bag.
Get your bag. I mean, you went through something.
All for it, but it discredits it a little bit for me.
Totally. I mean, here's the thing. Let me pause for a second. If you saw in the backyard an alien visitor from Venus came down, that would be a hell of a creature living on Venus, and it came down in a ship, thicked up from head to toe, and it steps down that ramp, and you got a story to tell. You can make some money to do it, but it would discredit. What would you do? Or maybe a ghost. Maybe I bring the ghost story back, and you experience something. Somebody offers you a book deal. It's going to be hard to say no, but you actually saw something. So what is your actual move?
It's to take the damn book deal.
Yeah, but then people go, see, he just wanted to sell his book.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I could.
See?
If I had enough money to just sustain myself, just roof over my head, food, I'm gone. Don't need the fame. Don't care. I'm offline. I ain't got no socials. I'm just quietly living my life.
So you're like the president. You will die knowing if aliens are real or not, and not caring if anyone believed you because you got your book deal.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Okay, I can feel that.
I don't need people to believe me at all.
Also, they wouldn't believe you anyway. You'd say, "I've got a high quality photo."
They wouldn't believe me anyways. I'll talk to my people like you would know, and I'd be like, "Look, this is real. I took the bag and I left, but this is real. Do what you want with it,
Yeah.
But no, I'm gone, man. Hell no. I'm taking that book deal. People are like, this, that. Don't care. I'm offline chilling, man.
Yep. Okay, there's your evidence, task force. If this man ever disappears, he's seen something and it's all real. It's all real.
Yeah, I saw something. I took the bag and I went, I'm just going to live peacefully. Hopefully the world doesn't turn to with a paranormal invasion or anything like that, or some kind of alien invasion.
Okay. Yeah. So as long as you're gone and you don't have the repercussions. Okay. Because that's the thing, is a lot of people go, well, you made a book deal, and so it was all about the money, and so it can't be real. But you're right. If you actually saw something and somebody came through with a book deal, it's kind of hard to, you know what I mean? There is a price. There is always a price.
It's difficult because, yes, there's always a price, but then also it's you went through the trauma and the issues.
Exactly.
Might as well get something out of it.
Right. And that's why I'm starting a new venture. Ghost insurance. If you or a loved one has been haunted, get ghost insurance. So that way, but you have to prove, right, to file a claim, you have to prove the evidence is real. And then you can get your payout. And then there's no book deal. And so then we know it's all real. But you still have your, your money for damages and trauma and things.
Here's the thing, too. You have to understand that, if the paranormal were to come out to be real, and this is a thing, and it's happening a lot. Oh, yeah, dude. People would profit. Someone thought ghost insurance.
Yeah.
There would be a new way to monetize and make money. You know what I mean? There would be. And you're ahead of the curve.
Paranormal insurance.
Oh, my goodness.
I don't like that it auto-completed. Oh, my goodness.
There is. I bet there is.
Oh, my God. AAA? Insure yourself against paranormal activity?
No way. There's no way.
This is ridiculous. I was being completely facetious.
Paranormal.
This cannot be real. October. Okay, it's an October 31st thing. Alien abduction insurance. This has to be fake.
It's got to be fake.
I've got the world's first real one. Sign up at redwebpod.com. We have multiple plans. And with those plans, you also get exclusive content and ad-free podcast episodes and no coverage. Okay, we've spun away from it all. But the point I wanted to make is yes, we always talk about, well, there's a book deal, movie deal, whatever. Can it be real if it's all about money? But at the end of the day, money is a high pressure item. Yes, is you don't need money, but it's it's a necessary tool in today's environment. You kind of have to have it. So it's leverage. And so
yeah,
I don't know. So it's possible that someone witnesses something real and then the book deal happens, and it doesn't necessarily have to discredit it, but it often feels like it does. Anyway.
No, I get that, because I would with literally anyone else. I mean, including myself, I'd be like, oh, yeah, it probably isn't real. They got the bag. Good for them. They're gone.
Yeah. Okay. So to give you an idea of the timeline now, it has been months, right? This all really began August 28th, is when she had a run-in with Bob McNeil and the revolver being pulled out. And then within the month, these paranormal activity events are happening. Her health has gone really sour. The doctors come through. And now it's December 1878. And this has all been going on for months, right? She's terrified. The sister's reporting on that. And this is where, unfortunately, Esther's condition continues to diminish. She is diagnosed with diphtheria. So diphtheria is an acute bacterial infection that attacks the mucous membranes and the respiratory system. To my casual understanding, in the late 1800s, this would have been quite life-threatening, with many children in particular being susceptible to this very highly contagious disease. And it wasn't until vaccinations that really helped wipe this out as a threat to kids and adults alike. But either way, I'm just trying to say it's a pretty serious condition to fall under. So for 2 weeks after this diagnosis, Esther is bedridden as she recovers.
Yeah, she's really going through it. But I mean, yeah, especially during those times, tons of sicknesses, not a lot of like vaccines and stuff like that for things that we have. And also, there's some sicknesses back then that just aren't a thing now.
Yeah, blessed be the vaccines that nearly wiped out so many different conditions from our common everyday. Some of them, like the measles, almost were eradicated, but then you have things like smallpox, which has been completely eradicated worldwide by vaccination. So it is wild that a stone's throw back into our history that, whether it be pneumonia, diphtheria, or many other illnesses, it's wild how they went from lethal to mild conditions that are just kind of annoying. I got the sniffles now,
That's true.
Okay, so Esther is now bedridden. It's 2 weeks that she is trying to recover. And it is worth noting that during this particular time period, there is no paranormal activity detected throughout the home. So keep in mind on that. After this time, though, she continued her recuperation at another one of her sister's houses, this time in Sackville, New Brunswick, also in Canada. This would have been about a 10-mile jaunt up the road, or maybe 16 kilometers if you prefer. And once again, when she moves out, the paranormal activity from the house she was in ceases completely. It wasn't until she returned to the Amherst house that paranormal events began to once again pick back up. And so, we now have a correlation between her absence or illness.
It's also kind of interesting that like she was, she had an illness for a couple weeks and all that paranormal activity stopped. Did the spirits or anything just go, you know what, just kind of going through it, let's take a break? Right.
Or maybe they're like, yo, we can really pawn this stuff off on her if we just chill out because she's in bed right now.
That's true. We could actually just get away with this cleanly.
Right. We don't want to go to ghost jail.
No.
But that's the thing is like, I can't help but see that correlation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
She moves out, she moves back in, that's when things come back. So now she is back at the Amherst house. This time though, the activity begins to escalate in a way that is beyond just the odd scratching on the walls, objects being moved or what have you. This time, it shows up in another unique way that I haven't seen. Random small fires are breaking out throughout the house. Notably, there was a fire in the cellar, or at least began in the cellar, that some reports kind of refer to as an inferno, because I was really curious the size of these fires, if there was a description we could look at, if there was common fuel sources, like, oh, the fires always start with these doilies or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that information, but the cellar fire was the biggest one, and it was referred to as an inferno.
There's, again, just unique things that are happening here. You don't really hear about, like, fires just being started, But here we are. I don't know. It's just very interesting because then things are just happening. A lot of different things ranging from subtle to over the top. And so I'm kind of excited to see if the possession goes even further. Do we get like, I don't know, something speaking or the supernatural speaking? Is there like demands? Is there something else that helps like describe what's going on?
Okay, well, these are good instincts because that's kind of what happens next.
Oh, okay. Well, dang.
Guys see in the future 5 seconds at a time.
5 seconds ahead.
Give them that's so Raven animation. Well, here's the thing. I do want to say this is a small little piece. She's not possessed. It's a poltergeist. It's a small difference. Get with it.
Yeah, that's true. Poltergeist. Yeah.
There's that small thing. Either way, though, you're right. There is kind of a demand. So shortly after these fires start showing up, Esther starts to speak about seeing a male ghost. She says this male ghost threatened to set the entire cottage on fire if she didn't leave that very night, or at least in the near future. Again, it depends on where you see this story. But basically, a masculine ghost showed up and said, "I will burn this house to the ground if you don't leave, essentially now." She never gave a description of this ghost other than that it was a man, but now we have motivation. Now we have the demand from the ghost, as you were kind of saying. Also, you made me think about something else. Like back in the late 1800s, these ghost stories all feel a bit wild and unique because they're all just kind of things that are happening are all attributed to the paranormal. And what's interesting is that across these dozens and dozens and maybe hundreds of well-documented cases or poorly documented cases, just throw them all in the hat, you start to see the trends of what stuck. And so it is interesting that the things flying across the room or levitating or furniture being upturned are the things that stuck the most, that those are like the common through threads, while things like fires being set in the house are much less common. It's kind of interesting when you think about it that way. Okay, so it's December. She's not moving out just yet, but it wasn't too long after that Esther seemed to heed the warning of this male ghost, because the next month, in January 1879, Esther decided to leave and went to stay with a local man and family friend named John White. From this point, all things seemed to calm down for a little while, but soon after, ghostly activity started up once again, this time in White's house. So instead of dying down while she's away, this time it seemed to follow her. Now, one report states that the fires once again started, but this time at White's house, and in fear that his house would catch on fire while he was gone, White managed to convince Esther to come with him to one of his working shifts at a local dining saloon. A dining saloon was an upscale social and dining establishment of the time, but basically this guy goes, "I don't know if it's paranormal, I don't know if it's you, but you know what? Why don't you just come with me to work? I don't want anything happening. I don't want you to get hurt. Why don't you just come with me?" So that way these things wouldn't happen.
Why don't you come on over? Let's just keep an eye on you, pretty much is what that's saying.
It does feel that way.
Yeah.
It all sounds very suspicious, as it isn't often that we see, activity follow a person so thoroughly. We've seen it before, and those cases do tend, historically, in my opinion, to circle around traumas or, harsh experiences. Those are the times where you see it really stick to a person versus a place. But what adds to the intrigue in this report is that it states that a knife, also at John White's house, flew across the room and stabbed Esther twice in the back. It wasn't a situation where a knife kind of fumbled off the counter and scraped her or cut her or what have you. By all accounts, it seems that it flew across the room, stabbed, and then removed and stabbed. Now, I'm not talking about 12 inches deep with the knife, but my understanding is that she had at least, some cuts on her back.
Oh, okay.
The severity is unclear.
Right.
But then I also have to really lighten this as like evidence, right? Because if it's so poorly reported that I don't know how vivid it is, it's really hard to lean on as some sort of like evidence. But the fact that another person is seeing this stuff happen at his house, seeing things move across the room, it does interest me. We have another party here witnessing this stuff and has no reason to lie, cover up, or add to these embellishments if it was actually Esther, right?
Yeah.
After this point, Esther continues to move around, and in late March of that same year, she spent time in St. John, New Brunswick. This is actually much further away than where she had kind of been traveling before. This would be another 124-mile trek, or around 200 kilometers from White's home in Sackville. So now in St. John, she stays here for 3 weeks and was visited by a group of what have been called scientifically minded gentlemen. But in the book that I'm going to talk about, and the author Walter Hubble, the author there describes these as occult scientists. He names them Dr. Allward, Mr. Amos Fallis, Mr. Alexander Christie, and Mr. Ritchie. Now, we don't know who these men are, but they are name dropped in this book. Regardless, these men allegedly developed a new method of communication that they believed would allow them to communicate with a poltergeist or a spirit. And their method kind of went like this, very, very similar to a Ouija board. They would ask a question in a seance-like manner with the person in the room and everything, and then they would list the alphabet. One letter at a time, I imagine, A, B, C, D. They would wait for a knock in the house, and they would mark down that particular letter. Seems very tedious, but they would repeat this process, laying out the alphabet until they no longer got an answer, and then they would spell out what the answer was, right? So if you asked a question, and then you gave the alphabet, and you wrote down Y, and then you wrote down E, and then you wrote down S, then your answer is yes. Again, a very long version of Ouija board.
Right.
And using this method, apparently, the poltergeist named itself. It said it was Bob Nickel and claimed that he was once a shoemaker. But it seems that Bob Nickel, the poltergeist shoemaker, was not the only spirit in the house. There was another ghost that identified herself as Maggie Fisher, and then a final third spirit that identified themselves as Peter Cox, who claimed to be a relative of Esther's father who had died 40 years prior. Maybe like an uncle or something like that.
Okay.
Now, after some time, they would come back, maybe do this a few more times. 3 other ghosts were identified doing this very same procedure. In total, there were 6 ghosts. You know the previous 3, but here's the next 3. Now you have Mary Fisher, who claimed that she was Maggie's sister. You have Jane Nickel, who had an unknown relationship to the previous Bob Nickel. And then you have Eliza McNeil, unknown if there's any relationship to the aforementioned Bob McNeil, the guy who pulled the gun on her. Notably, that was spelled McNeal. Again, McNeil, Bob McNeil was spelled many different ways. We don't know what it actually was.
Yeah.
But either way, we got 6 ghosts all up in this house, throwing knives at this poor sick girl. And it seems that after spending 8 weeks with another family there in Nova Scotia, in the countryside no less, Esther decided, hey, I'm returning back to my family in Teed's cottage there in Amherst. And as soon as she did, the activity once again followed her and continued back in this house.
That, unfortunate to be the core, the center of the poltergeist action with 6 different ghosts.
Right.
It's just so, man, what did you do to stumble upon that? That's just so many different personalities and wants and needs, and everyone's upset probably, and it's just wreaking havoc. I mean, I guess it does line up with how sporadic all the things are with what's happening to her in the house and everything like that. So
I also see this as kind of predatory. Whether it's happening or not, whether she's doing it or it's real, I still see this as predatory because you're coming in and you're adding to it. Whether you're adding fear or validating the illusion, neither to me are healthy, but you're coming in and trying to tell me that a sibling or a relative of her late father, a shoemaker named Bob Nickel, and a pair of sisters and an Eliza are all chucking stuff across the room, saying that they have the right to kill her. They're throwing knives at her. Why? I just can't attach a motive to any of this. It doesn't make any sense.
yeah, it all seems extreme.
Yeah. It'd be one thing if they stumbled into the name McNeil, right? Eliza McNeil, and then said, oh, well, this was Bob McNeil's sister. And maybe they didn't know, obviously, about the altercation she had in the car or the threat that she faced in that car. But again, I don't know. It just feels very flimsy, very unhealthy, very unhelpful. I don't know.
Yeah.
If I'm just being real.
All of it is pretty wild.
It is. But before we get to the theories, we got to talk about this book that I've been teasing this whole time. There's an American actor, okay, his name is Walter Hubble, and he had heard about Esther and her experiences. And he is pretty much the reason why we have so much of this documented. It's also why I need to urge you to think about this through the lens of a book, right? It feels like a lot of this is being heightened, and it could be because he's heightened it for his book.
Mm-hmm.
So he just finished up a theatrical tour across Newfoundland, the island way off of the northeast coast of Maine, near Nova Scotia, where she's growing up here. He requested to move in with the Teed family. taking us to either 6 or 9 people in this house. But he's like, listen, let me come over. Let me see what's going on. I don't know what makes him special because everyone is interested in this house, but he wants to see what's going on so he can document it. I have a air quotes picture of him. This is kind of like a wood carving illustration of his profile.
Oh.
This is Walter Hubble.
Okay. All right. Distinguished gentleman.
Sure. Wearing 16 layers of wool.
Lots of layers.
I feel like everyone was sweating.
Just sweat, man.
Yeah.
You go inside, taking 5 minutes to take everything off.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's important to note, because I did like this angle until I got cynical. Hubble was reportedly intent on proving that all of this haunting was a hoax. This was his preconceived notion, and he wanted to go in and see it for himself so he could say to the world, aha, I figured it out, don't worry. You know, he was largely a skeptic due to some negative personal experiences that he had with people claiming that they were in contact with ghosts or spirits. I always think of crossing over with John Edward, giving people who just lost somebody in their life false hope that they're talking to the dead.
Yep.
If that's the kind of thing he's talking about, good on him. He's kind of like Harry Houdini. Let's get out there and debunk this stuff, because as helpful as you might think you are, you might think you're providing closure, it's very sinister. It's a unhelpful band-aid. You know what I mean?
I would say so. You're just causing a lot of trauma.
Yeah, you're prolonging pain, and I don't know, it's false hope. It just feels very wrong. But I did like the idea that he was coming in more skeptic. Yeah, that's our approach. We come in, if things happen that we can't explain, that's how we leave it. But if we can't explain it, we're going to do our damnedest to try.
Yes, we
So
are.
that's kind of his angle. I'll get cynical later on here. So he documented his findings in a book titled, quote, The Great Amherst Mystery, a true narrative of the supernatural. So his short stay ended up being about 6 weeks, in which he kept a diary of everything that he experienced. In that diary, he wrote, and I'm kind of distilling it down here, what he experienced. In no particular order, he was being pelted with inanimate objects on a frequent occasion. He saw items vanish and reappear at random. He saw objects fly and levitate on their own, and he too was witness to spontaneous fires. Now, I was very curious about this, and Kat, bless her heart, dove into his book to get some answers, but it seems that a lot of these fires weren't small. I was really curious about the nature of these fires. If it was like lighting a big match and throwing it, well, the match might snuff itself out. What was the nature of this? Did they have to be extinguished? Were these genuinely dangerous?
Yeah.
Was there a common source or location? The only thing we could really tell is that they had to be extinguished. Somebody had to manually put the fire out or risk the house going down, right?
Yep.
Some sources describe things as, quote, bursting into flames. And like I said, the cellar fire was referred to as an inferno, though I don't really know how big it was, but I think honestly any fire outside of an oven, stove, or fireplace would be an inferno to me, because panic, all hands on deck.
Yep.
But yeah, we couldn't tell the size beyond that or anything else. Like, were they commonly on discarded t-shirts? Was it commonly on something highly flammable, or, you know, what have you?
Yeah, it also just seems like it's so extreme. Like things just randomly setting on fire, words appearing, and it does really much feel like maybe there was something to it. But
To an extent, yeah.
To an
yeah.
extent, but no, we're kind of just taking it and blowing it out of proportion.
I can feel that. Like, it's definitely evolved over these months, almost now into a year. But Hubble kind of talks about that a little bit. He says that this activity had a bit of a, I'll quote him, air of mischief to it, as if the intention of the poltergeist was kind of more to annoy him and the family rather than scare or terrify or actually harm, despite the knife and the warning of killing and the fires. Again, it's not all clicking super well like a Lego block for me, but I can see it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
Now, he also seemed to note that the activity seemed to lessen or even cease entirely on Sundays. So maybe these ghosts are God-fearing ghosts. We don't know.
Yeah. Well, it's also just unique because you think they wouldn't care if it was Sunday or not.
Right. You're stuck on this realm.
Yeah, this story has a lot of interesting, rules.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And the rules, like I said, they're not clicking together like my favorite Lego pieces do. You know, when it just snaps, crackles, and pops right in there. That's the thing is I'm a stickler here. So I'm trying to follow the rules of the game. And when it's a little inconsistent, something smells off. Now, what's also interesting, and this is where I started to get a little cynical, he does come in as a skeptic. He notes all these things. And despite being a skeptic, he was convinced that there was no way that Esther was capable of committing these acts herself. And honestly, if they're all over the house and they're happening at such a level, it's possible. And I would kind of want to believe that. But also, what better way to position your believer perspective if you're writing a book than to say, don't worry, guys, I was actually quite skeptical the whole time, but it convinced me it was real. You know what I mean? That's like if you and I suddenly just yes, I know our last ghost hunt was quite wild and we had a really good, if not kind of weird time, but it's not going to fundamentally change my approach unless I really see something, in which case the world would know. But that's where I get a little cynical. Is he actually a skeptic, or is he just another curious onlooker kind of looking to indulge or maybe even make a buck? I don't know. So he says at this point, he's noted all of this down, it's been quite some time, he tries to converse with this poltergeist in the same way, right, using the alphabet, the same way those air quotes scientists were trying to do before. He claims that the ghosts accurately told him the time on his watch, correctly guessed how many coins were in his pocket, and so then he asks a series of questions, and this is all in his words written down in his journal. Question: have you all lived
on the earth? Answer: yes. Question: have you seen God? Answer: no. Question: are you in heaven? Answer: no. Question: are you in hell? Answer: yes. Question: have you seen the devil? Answer: an emphatic yes.
So it seems that I guess in this case, when he's spelling out yes, the knocks are kind of louder because he's saying it was emphatically yes.
I mean, it's interesting that they're able to communicate so clearly, they're asking some hard-hitting questions.
Yeah, right? You're not haunting on Sundays. Does that mean you've seen God? Have you seen the devil?
Apparently not, though. But
apparently not.
Not for God.
Right. But the fact that it's, again, following the rules, whether it's his disposition, Hubble's religion, or the spirit's religion, either way, we can see, okay, we have a God, heaven, hell, and devil. So very standard Christian kind of belief system here, which kind of localizes it. I don't know. I'm always looking in history. Who could the ghost be? Right?
Yep.
Is it in indigenous peoples? Is it from colonial times when the French were up in the Canadian area? Or is this from a couple weeks ago when I guess Bob the shoemaker passed away and now he's here? I don't know. Again, it's just when you really start to look at all the pieces of evidence, I get so interested in the possible story of who the poltergeist is, but it doesn't go well. It doesn't flow.
Yeah, especially when there's possibly 6 of them.
6 of them. Right.
Which is a lot. Because then, I don't know, who's responding? Can you trust that response? It's all messy.
That's a great point. Who's to say you could believe it? Because, and that's the plot of many ghost story movies, that it's just a demon in disguise, right? This is the most interesting part of this. Hubble recalls that on June 27th, 1879, the family heard a trumpet being played throughout the day. Maybe this is just a neighbor, but it sounded loud and near. And although no members of the family owned, let alone played a trumpet, using the knocking method, Hubble asked who was playing the trumpet, and the poltergeist replied, Bob. So Hubble then goes, okay, Bob, if you wouldn't mind, drop that trumpet into this room. I want to see the trumpet you're playing. And apparently, according to the story, that night, a trumpet did indeed fall somewhere from out of nowhere, from the ceiling down to the floor. According to Hubble, the activity continued, if not increased, from this point, and it was decided that Esther had to leave for the sake and safety of the family.
So did the phase through the floor?
It seems like it, phased through the floor, through the ceiling down to the ground level, is what is described, that it fell out of thin air, essentially.
Oh man, this is wild stuff. Real big movie theatrical things happening here. Stuff phasing out of the floor.
Right. And as much as I want to believe, as always, just the knowledge, the depths of detail of this whole case have really pushed me to the skeptic side. And so when I hear something like this, I'm desperate to want to believe it because it's so fascinating. But also like, can I even see that trumpet? Is that trumpet anywhere? Or like what happened to it?
It's so over the top.
It's pretty over the top. Yeah.
And that's a thing, right? Where I'm just like, the subtle things for me, I'm just like, oh, I don't know, maybe. And then you're just like, things are phasing through, fires are starting. I'm like, this is wild.
Yes. And this next part is probably why, in addition to the traumatic experience Esther had early on, this next part is coloring why I've been so skeptical this whole time. So let me just unfurl it.
Got it. Here we go.
Yeah. So these stories are so fascinating, if not outlandish, very, very compelling and interesting. I love it from a story perspective. But at this point, Hubble is saying, hey, you need to leave because this is becoming unsafe for you and your family, so come with me. So they go off together. But they don't just leave and he's not looking after her. They go on a speaking tour in which she expanded on her series of stories from the house. Many, of course, would flock to hear these stories, believers and skeptics alike. However, one night she was indeed badly heckled by somebody in the audience claiming that she was just a fraud. And a disturbance broke out. People began to argue and yell and things. And after this, she said, I've had enough of this. I don't want to be the center of attention anymore. I don't know if this tells you anything or if this says anything, believer or skeptic. But either way, she went home. She's like, I'm done with this. I'm going back to Amherst. It's unclear if this is the last time she saw Hubble, but it appears that the pair had limited communication once she came home. And then sometime later, apparently he wrote to Esther's family to inquire about her fate. It was revealed that shortly after returning to Amherst, she began working for a local man named Arthur Davison. Soon after that, while she was working for him, his barn burned down, and he accused her of arson. Now, obviously, fires were following her all over the place due to, so far, the poltergeist activity. But because of this and the claim of arson, Esther was in fact arrested and later convicted of arson. She was sentenced to 4 months in jail. However, she reportedly only spent 1 month in jail, apparently due to the public pleading for her release. Many people believing that the arson couldn't have been done by her. This was something that was happening in a paranormal kind of way. And I don't know how you only go away for 1 month for burning someone's barn down, but she did get released.
I mean, it could just be because there's so much attention around it.
Yeah, you know what? A small town cop, you start to go, you know what? I don't need this heat. I don't want that smoke. She seems fine. Let's just, if it happens again though, right?
Right, exactly. But for now, it's like, let's just get this problem out of our hands.
It's interesting that you kind of put that out there because after she's released, November 1879, poltergeist activity and encounters stop completely. It is almost like she was caught, slapped on the wrist, or that the ghost said, I'm also done with this, I'm bored, or I'm done with the heat. Whatever it is, it does, like from a skeptic perspective, it does fit, right? She was caught for something, and you can't keep blaming it on the ghouls, right? Because now you're going to jail for it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. It's like, is she causing some of these problems?
It does. It is possible, I'll say that way. But it does also seem like it. In the following years, Esther was married 2 times. She had 2 sons, and she passed away on November 8th, 1912, at the age of 52. Although Hubble remained skeptical and critical of those claiming to be spiritual mediums, he maintains that disposition. By the end of his time with Esther, he was convinced that ghosts were real. In his book, I'll quote him, he wrote this, quote, From what I saw
and heard in the haunted house, I've been led to infer that the ghosts of the dead live in a world similar to ours, and that it is to them just as material as our world is to us.
End quote. And there ends the story before we hit the theories of the Great Amherst Mystery. Probably the most detailed encounter from the 1800s that we have.
I'd say so.
But fascinating nonetheless.
It's very theatrical.
I think that's an apt description.
Yeah, I mean, just over the top in terms of like things that are happening. I mean, again, the big thing, things are phasing through walls.
That's pretty wild. I would love to see that happen.
Poltergeist type situation to defying physics.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
So it's just like, how?
I'm just thinking some young boy sixth grader with a trumpet, that's me, blowing away on his bugle next door, and this poor family has been caught up in trauma and whatever is going on with these encounters. They hear this trumpet. They've got a strange man living with them for 6 weeks, and he goes, "That's the ghost!" And they're like, "Mr. Hubble, please, it's the neighbor." He goes, "No, it's the ghost." I'll put it in my book. But I love that it showed up. But is that just him kind of self-validating his own story, his own encounter?
Good chance.
I don't know. Are these the trumpets of heaven? Can't be. These poltergeists are from hell. But also he's saying they live in a world that's real to them like ours is to them. But he also is saying that they're from hell, like these ghosts are haunting remotely from hell. So I'm just like, you know what I'm saying? I don't want to be a stickler, but I am. It's a little.
Yeah. It's very, the world's very expansive here. There's a lot of lore, you know what I mean? Even more than you get in like a horror movie.
I don't know. I don't like to be a wet blanket. I love these sort of stories, but we'll talk about the two angles here. Let's just dive in, right? So we have the believer and skeptic angles, of course, and we're going to hit them in that order. Now, the most obvious theory here, of course, for many people still to this day, is that Esther Cox truly was haunted by a poltergeist. However, there's a lot of holes in this theory and more than it may seem. Of course, we highlighted many along the way. But again, this opens the door to like, we're speaking about a thing that if real, we don't fully understand and don't fully know. And it could be that in her trauma, in her illness, and in this heightened kind of really tight quarters house, it could be that the energy was just such a way that something otherworldly was attracted to it to feed off of it, especially if it's sinister entities from hell, and they might just be lying about who they are if they're real. And so they're like, part of me really is fascinated by that potential. But let's talk about some of the holes too. Some journalists and writers have noted that there is no evidence that Hubble corroborated the claims he made with the Amherst community, as he previously claimed he had done. Hubble references newspapers, but when you look closer at those newspaper references, those are actually things that are traced back to Hubble himself. And so it's a logical fallacy. He's kind of, oh, well, look, it says that in that newspaper. Ignore the fact that it's in the newspaper because of you. You're using yourself as validation for your disposition, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're not actually corroborating your claims with the community as much as you're looking in a mirror and going, I'm right. Now, some have claimed that Hubble sensationalized and used Esther to conjure publicity for this book that he made on this case, and also used this to bolster his attention for his acting career. He has a lot of reason to do that. It's very viable, even if this was real, that he might have done that. Arthur Davison, the farmer that Esther worked for upon returning to Amherst, allegedly also claimed that Hubble, quote, painted the facts up to make the book sell, end quote. And this is the guy that kind of didn't take any silliness. He's like, fire started in my barn went down. It's you. This is a guy that's saying, I don't believe it's ghosts. And that this guy that's kind of living with you, he's just like hamming it up, right? These are all damning details for one of the biggest proponents of the poltergeist stories. This doesn't really answer for the many other witnesses who had detailed their experiences in newspapers, people that weren't writing books trying to make money off this. Like the doctor that came through this isn't going to help his doctoral, like his medical career by saying that ghosts are throwing pajamas in the room.
Yeah.
So yes, we talked about that in the Talking Mongoose episode many years back, like how an individual could do these things and how it could be a prank of some kind. We certainly explored this through the Enfield case and the exploration of trauma, which we'll talk about here in a second. But the fact that so many people had their eyes on this, it does add some credence to it, because you'd think that some of them would be skeptical and looking out for answers, looking for somebody scratching on the walls themselves. Seeing things move without an obvious source is a pretty interesting piece of evidence. And it's the presence of these other witnesses, I think, that keep this story of a poltergeist alive for so many believers.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. It's just so over the top. And I guess a lot of people are like, oh, this is why I believe the poltergeist. And that's where I go, guys, we gotta take a step back and kind of look at it a little bit deeper here. There's words of tangible things, right? Tales of tangible things. It's a double-edged sword though, because it's so far back, it's really hard to document anything against some of the information, even basic information like how many people were in the house.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
There's the game of telephone.
Totally.
And that's what it gets so frustrating. It's like, just take the information and pass it on. You don't need to add anything. You don't need to change anything
At all.
Just stop doing it. Stop putting your herbs and spices into the story, into the tale. The recipe's good as is.
Yes.
You know? And
KFC Kentucky fanfic. You're putting your herbs and spices on it. That's a great point. That even happens with proper investigated cases in the mid-century, right? You have police on scene with tangible evidence, and even still it gets misreported, which is why I always want to be very, very honest about the differences we hear, because I don't want to perpetuate different stories. I don't want to pick one and then choose that's the real one. I'm just always going to be real about it.
Good point.
That's what we're always going to be like. But yeah, you're incredibly right and astute to point that out. And especially with a case like this, dude, it's so interesting. I really was intrigued by this one, especially the level of detail. But you're right. It's still 135 plus years of God knows what level of misreporting. And there's podcasts just like ours that take it into more of a storytelling perspective and then heighten things for the sake of unnerving or adding something that you only hear here with us. Like we've got the detail. No, dude, it's all out there. It's old. It's there's no new revelations on this one.
No.
But with that, I think we should dive into the idea of spiritualism combined with that of PTSD. This is something we have talked about before in cases like this, but many believe that what Esther went through was not a poltergeist, not a paranormal haunting, but rather something more like a trauma response to her encounter with Bob McNeil. I mean, you pointed this out. It's very hard to see past that once you realize that that was what happened in her life immediately preceding these events. And again, I understand the attraction when we're talking about negative energies and ghosts showing up. I understand that. But as somebody who's seen many cases like this, it's really hard to step away from traumatic events like that combined with paranormal and poltergeist level activity like this. It is very related oftentimes. Writer Lori Glenn Norris actually heard about this story, and this prompted her to write a book called Haunted Girl, Esther Cox, and the Great Amherst Mystery. So Norris wanted to learn more about Esther's story, which I think is perfectly natural. She wanted to learn more, though, not just about what she experienced paranormally, more than just these 15 months of eerie experiences and weird phenomena. And it's because of her, I believe, that we have the story of Bob McNeil. She wanted to know more about Esther as a person, everything that led up to this and everything after. A very wise angle to take. Now, she discovered that Esther's life prior to these events was anything but easy, and this adds so much more important color. She had a very hard life. Her mother died when she was just 3 weeks old. Her siblings were then separated, and she then went to live with her paternal grandparents. And then at 17, she was sent to live with her sister Olive, and this is where the story takes off when she's 18. Now, all of Esther's sisters went and got married, and her life was dedicated to kind of being a provider. She looked after the children, she cleaned, she cooked for everybody. And Norris believes, and this is her opinion, that what happened with McNeil was the, quote, straw that broke the camel's back. And I can totally see that. When you're helping your family members grow and move on with their lives and enter these new chapters, but you yourself might feel frozen and also lost your maternal figure early in life. Again, I'm not a psychologist, but I have to imagine that that is a heavy burden.
Mental traumas.
Oh, absolutely. And so when you have a gun pulled on you in a moment where we don't even know what's going on in her head leading up to this, I can see something just snapping. Like, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of all of it. I don't know what it feels like to have a gun pulled on me, and God willing, I'll never know. But man, it has to be, just even in isolation, a terrifying event, let alone with her whole backstory. You know what I mean?
Oh, it's got to be. It's just trauma compacting on top of trauma. And if you don't, seek help to help work past that trauma, if you don't do the work, then it just carries with you into relationships and your day-to-day.
And honestly, and not even being facetious here, that is the real haunting.
True.
Because the haunting of trauma, it permeates your life, shows up in ways you can't possibly imagine. And honestly, people sometimes don't even know that specter is with them. It can be hard to see it from inside, but from the outside, it can be so obvious. So Norris, in her book, notes that during this time period, of course, as I kind of talked about in other episodes, spiritualism is on the rise. Ghost stories are becoming quite a popular form of entertainment. And here's what Norris had to say about the situation. I'll quote her. What happened,
I think, is things got out of control. Esther was a victim, but in some ways, she also had agency. Whether she believed this was happening, whether she had some sort of episode because of this traumatic thing that happened to her, I think at some point she said, hey, I am getting attention with this. What is kind of hard for us to think of today is it became fashionable to be in Esther Cox's bedroom and watch things happen.
That is such a pull the camera way back moment where, like, I'm even sitting here saying this is a fascinating story, but it removes the humanity within it, right? It's to trivialize and make entertainment out of just this otherwise wild life that she's living. You know what I mean? And so to tell this purely as a ghost story without giving the respect of Esther Cox as a person would be, I think, a big disservice, a disgrace, disrespectful.
I would think so. There's a whole picture to be looked at here instead of all the glamour of, poltergeist, hauntings, things like that.
Certainly. So Norris also believes that this whole ordeal started as tricks, right? And I can kind of see this happening. Esther and Jenny would play these tricks in a time where people were extra eager to believe in ghosts, and these ghost stories began to spiral. Maybe it was in response to, the traumatic event. Maybe it was because she was beginning to fall ill, and so this was a way to distract and kind of make light of things going on in her life and kind of reclaim some control. But if it kind of spiraled out of control, right, and it becomes taking on a life of its own, you almost feel trapped by this story. Now, what's interesting is Norris also found that Esther had a reputation of setting fires and committing self-harm. And while there's little information on this behavior back then, it is now believed to be a response to trauma. Now, some have even suggested that Esther showed symptoms of having a split personality, believing that she entered into a dissociative state and she herself would then act as a poltergeist, which would kind of leave her to believe in her other personality that this poltergeist wasn't her, that it was an external entity if it was a different personality. Depending on the situation, right? Not always are these personalities unaware of each other, but I don't know in this particular case. That's kind of one of the floating theories out there. Many others simply believe that Esther was a complex woman who had experienced something that deeply traumatized her, and all that followed was a response to what she had gone through. Ultimately, the claims of Hubbell's reporting have been largely embellished, perhaps to sell books. That's what's been widely believed and reported. And local newspapers may have simply muddied the facts, exaggerated these claims because they themselves are also trying to sell copies. So it's truly difficult to say what might have actually happened there in Teed's cottage to Esther Cox. But we do know that her life was quite heavy leading up to it. That's what we know for a fact. Now, her story remains one of the most widely witnessed poltergeist cases in history, which is why ultimately, we wanted to cover it. All the many details, all the very shocking elements to the story, but ultimately at the end of the day, a sad story of a real woman at the center of all of it.
Yeah, I think it's a person that was tortured, just mentally, and going through a lot. And then from there, her traumas just became entertainment for others. And then so she kind of sat and stayed in the torment. And that's really unfortunate because it's a real mental health thing.
And even in recent years, mental health is slowly shaking off the stigma as full generations are becoming more aware of their own mental well-being and things. So I can only possibly fathom what it would be like in the back half of the 1800s. Completely unknown, in certain ways, experimental in others. So it's a very interesting case, but I don't think, in my humble opinion, that we have a ghost story here as much as we have the trauma, which is the ghost in this case. Like a story of a woman and her trauma and her life's ups and downs, and mostly downs, it seems.
That's what I'm thinking too. I'm thinking it's just someone that's gone through a lot of trauma, and it's very unfortunate, but I think that's what's happening here. And I think it manifested itself in some of these things that happened, right? As like an outburst, as a cry for help. But I think that's where we're at.
I can see, scratches and banging on the walls being like the principal cornerstone of what happened. And that can be easily debunked by, vibrations through the post of a bed, down into the floor, into the walls of this house. This isn't a modern day building. These vibrations are going to reverberate and they could sound like they're coming from anywhere. And with that simple fact, if that's the real thing that happened and everything else is an embellishment of fear and curiosity, I can really see this story, I think, clearly. But it is a very interesting one nonetheless. We have explored many ghost stories across the years of this podcast. We've seen the origins of a ghost story, how something goes from a mistelling, an experience to the next generation kind of picks it up as a ghost story to then it becomes folklore that sticks around for a while. But in this very unique way, and again, I'll harken back to the Enfield Poltergeist, we see two very sad stories about how real human experience itself maybe is the specter behind the scenes. And that, I think, is always something to think about when you hear a ghost story sometimes, is what maybe else is going on, whether it be dark like this and upsetting, or maybe just like more pranky. Like I say, the talking mongoose is a great example of something that's a lot more levity, a lot more like light, I think. But with that, the Great Amherst Mystery, I think, comes to a close. Lots of themes in this one, Fredo. Like I said, lots to kind of process, I think. But Task Force, I would love to hear your thoughts. On Discord, we have a channel for every single episode we have uploaded. And whether it be your opinions on the theories Alfredo and I discussed, or maybe it's theories of your own, we're always loving to read through those. And if you want to join our Discord, you can do so at redwebpod.com. It is, like I say, the number one way to support the show. And if you want to support the show in other ways, a free way, share this podcast with a friend or family member, somebody that you want to talk to about these very interesting cases. We range all over the place these days. We started in very humble beginnings from internet mysteries, and now we're talking about stolen racehorses. I mean, what comes to mind now is the Great Canadian Maple Heist Syrup.
True, that's a big one. These little various things that all fit within this, strange little world.
Wild indeed. But with that, Task Force, we'll see you on this Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central. We're going to have a live show there. We'll see you on Friday for some gameplay exclusively at redwebpod.com. But Fredo, I'll see you right back here next Monday for yet another mystery.